Hi there, I'm Andre Rabe,
Mary-Anne.
and yes, we heretics.
Hi, Andre and
Mary-Anne.
Welcome to the show. It's been so long since I've talked to you guys. So really excited to have you as our heretics of the week, plural this time, which is we've only done that once. So it's a blessing to have two people on at once. So welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Actually, I was going to say,
Keith.
I talked to Andre, I think yesterday or 2 days ago. So yeah, it's not been that long for me to talk to Andre, but yeah. And my first time talking to you, Mary-Anne. So this has been great. Thank you guys for being on.
Yeah, thank you. So what we like to do to kick off these interviews is ask our guests why do people consider you heretics?
Okay, you know what? I think whenever you say something specific, I think there is going to be people who get upset with that, and we certainly don't go out or enjoy just offending people for the fun of it or the sake of it. Our whole goal is, to encourage, to inspire. But, even in those terms, some people find it very offensive that God is love and God is not manipulative. God is good only, etc. So I guess whenever you say something specific and you say it with persuasion, there's going to be some disagreement. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that?
Wait.
It's strange to me that people are offended and afraid of the idea that God is love. Isn't that weird?
But it says it in the Bible. Come on now.
But brother, it also says that God is a God of wrath. Don't forget. We have to make sure we always add that in, right?
Yeah. And I guess, part of that comes down to that attitude that truth can only be expressed in one way, in one story, in one narrative. And if your terminology or your way of articulating a specific concept doesn't conform to the way in which, I've been brought up or the way my religious cult have indoctrinated me with, then you must be a heretic. And I guess one of the most beautiful things we've discovered over the past few years is there's more than one way to tell a story. And truth has got many beautiful angles, and there's dimensions to this narrative that we find ourselves in that's so beautiful. And to flatten it to a one-dimensional story that can only be told in one way is really so boring. So I guess that aspect of there's more angles to truth than what you've been taught. That's probably a major reason why people would consider others heretics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just odd to me. I mean, I don't understand why. Like whenever I talk about God being love, it's like Christians are more offended by the idea that God is absolute love than they are offended by the idea that God would torture his children forever. I don't understand that.
It is. I think that, we can think back of a time where I grew up in the evangelical world where I can somehow grasp or try and remember that situation in which I believed both God was love and that he was going to torture people forever. And really the only way you deal with it is you ignore it. You kind of bury it so deep and you avoid any meaningful discussion around it because you instinctively know it's so contradictory that I've got to embrace the most ridiculous notion of mystery to believe it both, because it's actually not a mystery to believe both is true. That's just nonsense. There's a difference between nonsense and mystery.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you have children, correct?
Yeah, we've got 2.
And you're married, so it's one of those things that, and I'm married and have a child, and Keith same. Yeah. So you guys mentioned that obviously having children and being married and our experiences kind of help shape and mold our theology and our worldviews. Has there been some other major events in your, we could loosely call deconstruction, that seems to be the buzzword these days, that have helped you move from a place of maybe evangelicalism or some sort of fundamentalism to where you are today?
I don't think there's anything that transforms our theology more than an experience of God. And even as we started traveling, as missionaries very early on when we were 18 years old, and then in later life again, the experience of God always seemed to be better than what my theology allowed. Yeah. And I was in this place where I have to choose: do I just shut down the experience, or do I allow this experience to transform my theology? And so there's been many experiences on that road where God has really surprised us, overwhelmed us with. I think it was the philosopher Jean-Luc Marion that spoke about saturated experience, or phenomena, as he called it, and he referred to an event and the experience of that event that is larger than our capacity to receive, that is larger than our language. It transgresses the borders of our concepts. And it's an event, an experience that you can never neatly get a hold of and master. It's always an event that masters you. It reminds me of Paul saying, it's not that I have attained, but for the rest of my life, I'm going to try and get a hold of what got hold of me. Mm-hmm. And if your experience of God is something that you've absolutely mastered, that you can articulate perfectly and that you're in control of, then you have undoubtedly not experienced God. You've experienced your concept of God. You've mastered your philosophy of God. But God himself remains an overwhelmingly extravagant, larger gift than what we could ever master. And in the attempt to receive this gift, it expands our capacity and it draws our language into dimensions that they haven't been drawn in before. And so I have always appreciated that aspect of allowing our words not to become so rigid and our doctrines to not become so defined that they restrict the movement of God's Spirit, which is larger than our language. There's been many experiences for us. I'm thinking, one of the experiences a few years ago, we were, for about 7 years, we were constantly traveling every week in a different place, speaking to a new group. And on one of those tours, we found ourselves in the Netherlands, and we had about a week between appointments, which we always try to find a week between ministry, a week per month where we could just be with one another and try and be normal before we be with the next group. And we saw this week gap between our last appointment in the Netherlands and our first appointment in Switzerland. So we decided it would be fun to maybe cycle. It was only 1,600 kilometers.
Only.
And,
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's good. Just a quick trip.
and we haven't practiced for it. We didn't cycle since we were teenagers at that stage. But in any case, the people we stayed with, they had a bed and breakfast, and they generally offered just the bicycles that they lent to guests to go to the shops and back for us to use. Well, thankfully, at our last meeting, a friend came to us and said, I hear you want to cycle to Switzerland. He said, I've got touring bikes that I bought because my wife and I wanted to do that. But after we rode for about half an hour, she decided this is not for me. And the bikes has been in the garage ever since. So we actually had some good bikes. And I'm getting to the spiritual relevance to this. I'm just setting up the background.
Thank you.
So we started cycling. What a beautiful adventure. I think after about 4 or 5 days, we did about 100 kilometers a day. And we knew that we wouldn't make it in time to Switzerland, so we decided we'll take a train after the first 400 or 500 kilometers we did. So that evening, Mary-Anne and myself went to a pub nearby, and we had a Radler. It's a real refreshing German drink. And it's like a beer shandy, I think is what you'll call it in the States. And we were sitting back and clinking our glasses and celebrating the 5 days of fun we had. And the yellow jacket hornet came and sat on Mary-Anne's back and started stinging. She leaned back and she shouted with pain. I just immediately hit it and broke it in half. I had to take half the hornet out her back.
But it carried on stinging.
It carried on stinging.
Yeah.
Oh,
So the waiter saw this. He came running with some ice, put the ice on. She'll tell the actual story of what happened. I'm just setting it up. But we put the ice on. The pain went back. And as we walked to our Airbnb room, we went into a little shop just to get water. And that's when Mary-Anne suddenly realized something else is happening.
Yeah, so immediately my heart started just throbbing and my head felt like it was going to explode. And then I lost feeling in my fingers. And I thought, okay, something's going on here. I didn't immediately even relate it to that. And so I just shouted out to Andre, antihistamine. And so he kind of, as he started running off into the distance to try and look for that, apparently, when he returned, I was on the floor unconscious.
So to chip in here, they didn't have antihistamine in the shop. So I was going to run over the road to our cases, to our room to get the antihistamine there. As I ran out, I just asked one of the staff members to please call 911, which they did.
And so I can maybe explain to you, I'll go backwards and forwards. So what happened in that moment when I lost consciousness, it was like the slipping out of consciousness into the most magnificent embrace. And I just felt like I'm surrounded with light and with love, just surrounded round and round and round. And in that moment, there was not a sense or an inch of fear. It was just such peace and such a belonging and knowing that I'm loved. And so maybe I'll skip ahead because it was later that Andre started asking me what I experienced. But I had...
Shall I fill it in? Just a little detail there. So I ran back. Mary-Anne's unconscious on the floor. I've got to kind of slap her awake, and this precious little German girl that worked at the cashier was just shouting, no, you come back. And she kind of woke up enough for me to pop some pills in her mouth, throw in water. But it's as if she came from a three-dimensional world into a flat world. She came back and just kind of was totally shocked, pushing in all directions. At that moment, the emergency services arrived because they were just a block away, and they gave her like the adrenaline shots, etc. And then we went to hospital. Yeah.
But it was, while I was in the ambulance on the way, my organs started shutting down, and so it was anaphylactic shock, which I found out later. And I basically came round when they'd administered everything in the hospital, and Andre came to me, and he was holding my hand, and I said to him, I was gone. And so he said, yeah, I know, you were unconscious. I said, no, I was in a beautiful place. And he suddenly realized how serious it was. And he started asking questions. That's Andre. Just answering questions. I could hardly talk at that time. I was trying to, trying to get words out of my mouth.
I want to know, was it the city or was it the country? Who was there?
Did you see anything?
And it was quite precious because at the moment where he said who was there, and I kind of just turned to him and went, you were there, silly, kind of, it was just a given. And he just broke down because he realized, from his perspective, he'd lost me. But from my perspective, there was no distance between us. And I think when I was trying to find words to describe afterwards, it was like I was suddenly aware of the most magnificent color and movement, but it wasn't like it was somewhere else, some other time. It was like it was right here, right now, but everything came alive, and everything that was temporal kind of just disappeared, and what was love remained. And how to describe love's embrace, when I came round, I just wanted to love everyone. I was like, every moment that I'm in this body, I am going to love every person, everything. And so I started with the paramedics that were there, and I was hugging them. Eventually, apparently the hospital said, you better test her for drugs. Ain't no high like the most high, hey? And I think, when we've spoken about it as well afterwards.
Well, that was quite funny as well, because we were on a train the next day. It was during a heat wave.
I didn't know what funny.
Well, that night, oh my goodness, that was the Airbnb from hell. But we didn't sleep. But the next day on that train, it's train heading through Germany to Switzerland.
Carry your bikes upstairs with luggage,
and we were sitting in the train, and for the first time, you kind of allow yourself to feel what happened, because in the middle of the situation, I just need to keep calm, decide what to do, run for the pills, phone whoever, you don't feel the whole situation. And suddenly, as we were sitting on the train, and it's one of those experiences that's larger than your capacity to receive in the moment. Yeah. It actually continues to unfold. And so on this train journey, we were both trying to find words for what we experienced. And I looked over to Mary-Anne and just realized it was so close. I could have sat on this train today on my own. And the magnitude of the moment and the gratitude to just look at her and realize, you here? I just started bawling, to the great discomfort of all our
German passengers.
Our German challenged passengers. But
But it's amazing as well, even just speaking about the experience afterwards, which, in some ways people were surprised, but I was just filled with gratitude. And I think that's something that, if we can reinterpret events in our past, in our, things that happen in our lives, gratitude can transform that moment into something that just transforms the meaning of that event in your life. And I think in terms of even our experience here and now of love, I've heard people speaking about, certain visions they've had of heaven and French toast in heaven and never quite taste the same on earth again. We spoiled that kind of impression that somehow this existence is devalued and this moment is devalued. And I really believe that God wants to transform our moment into one of love and light and life. And, that this moment is significant because you are here and you have access to all of God.
And that's exactly what that experience, that it enriched our appreciation and enjoyment of this world here and now. I think the kind of spirituality that boasts in seeing all kinds of heavenly visions that somehow devalues this world and this flesh and this experience is basically just a pathetic attempt to set people up as some spiritual gurus that feeds off the sense of insufficiency of those who listens to them. And that's what Paul kind of warns about those who boast in having seen angels and these things. They boast in it because they just trying to really tap into people's sense of lack and then manipulate them with their doctrines.
Professional.
I think an authentic experience of God and of these spiritual realms will always bring you back to the incredible beauty that's right here and right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think, if something I took away from that moment as well was just my appreciation for all of life has changed. I see in that moment where suddenly the here and now transformed into the most magnificent movement and color. It was like this earth, this creation is throbbing for, to be appreciated and for us to realize that God is here in our midst.
Yes.
And that all of creation is incarnation and richness of life. And if we'll just open our eyes to it, it's available.
I love. Thank you so much for pointing that out. I think it is true. Like, we miss the fact that we already live in a paradise. We already live in the presence of God, and honestly, I think that's one of the things that I've been really. It's really helped me. I mean, I haven't had an amazing experience like you've had. That's pretty incredible. But what's helped me is to recognize, like, when Jesus talks about, he says, "If you love me, my Father and I will love you, and we will come and make our home in you." We're like, well, how do we define heaven? Well, heaven is wherever God is, and we're with Him. Yeah. And what Jesus says is that, well, heaven is in you. Like, it's you can't be closer to God than you are at this moment. And recognizing that, it's like suddenly you recognize that, oh, I'm not waiting for anything. I'm not postponing, this anything in the future. It's like, no, I can experience all of that right now. I mean, maybe after I'm dead, I'll experience it in a deeper way or in a different way. But it's not as if I'm separated from experiencing that at this moment.
Exactly.
We're always open to surprise.
Well, that was such a beautiful story, and I've heard it before, but I think I only heard it. I quote unquote heard it when you guys wrote it, and I think it was on Facebook. But just hearing you talk about it was so profound, and especially at a time like this, in what's going on in the world, like just to hear that God is in our midst, and I mean, there's beauty everywhere, and just the deep sense of appreciation and gratitude for life as such. And I think more people need to hear that and be reminded of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just such a powerful story. So thank you so much for sharing that. But before we wrap up, we want to definitely give our listeners a chance to be able to get in contact with you or follow your work, and want to know where people can do that. And also, if you're working on anything, please let people know about that so that they can anticipate getting their hands on some of your work.
Okay, well, the latest work that just came out a few months ago is a book called Creative Chaos, and I think it is more relevant now than ever before to realize that God does not, the way God deals with chaos is not to make it an enemy. If we look at Genesis 1, he actually hovers over the depth, over that abyss, and begins to call forth the beauty, the possibilities that is present within it. And so Creative Chaos, you can just search for that on Amazon. Our website is called Always Loved with a D at the end, .net. And there's a lot of free resources and articles, videos, and things available there, as well as on YouTube. You can just search for Always Loved. Mary-Anne's got some music on YouTube as well. But it's all it's all on the website. One of the things that we're really excited about, and I'll just take half a minute to introduce that, is we have an academy that runs a year-long program. We've got 2 courses. Both of them are year-long. The first one is called the Mimetic Transformation Program. And the second one is the Mimetic... I don't know, I just kind of forgot the word, the word that I have there. But that mimesis.academy is what the website is called. And the second one is called the Mimetic Conversion Program. So the difference between the 2 programs is just one, the conversion one retells the whole meta story, while the transformation program is a much more personal, in-depth study of mimesis and how, by the transformation of our desires, God, our whole person and our whole self is transformed. We've just finished our first course this year, which was on meditation, and some powerful, testimonies and experiences coming out of it. So I would love for people to have a look at that. This year is already full, but something to consider for next year. Yeah. Thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we encourage our listeners, definitely go check that out. And
it sounds awesome.
Yeah, totally. Well, yes. So thank you so much, y'all. Keith, you got something to say?
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say thank you both so much for what you do, for your spirit, your heart, your message.
Yeah.
Keep doing it, man. We need it so badly. And it's beautiful just to see what God has been doing through your heart to just kind of shine and spread and share the love of Jesus to the world. That's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Keith and Matthew.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.